Maximize Business Value podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their business on their terms. Our mission was born from the lessons we've learned from over 100 business transactions, which fuels our desire to share our experiences and wisdom so you can succeed. Now here's your host, CEO of Mastery Partners, Tom Bronson.
Hi, this is Tom Bronson, and welcome to Maximize Business Value, a podcast for business owners who are passionate about building long-term sustainable value in your business. This episode is part of our series called Tales from the 17% Club. If you're a longtime listener, then you know, as we've said over and over again, a full 83% of attempted business transitions fail to reach the finish line, meaning that only 17% are successful. So in this series, we interview people who have successfully transitioned their business. We call them the 17% Club, to learn more about the process and hear some interesting stories along the way. Today won't disappoint. So in this episode, I'd like to welcome our guest, Beth Denton, who is the former owner and CEO of Medistar Home Health, which she sold in 2017. Beth and I have known one another for close to 10 years. First meeting was when she was thinking about transitioning her business and looking for some advice. And then we served together on the Business Navigators Board of Directors for several years. And so I know that Beth has a true servant leader's heart. And I'm excited to talk to her today about her business transition. So welcome to Maximize Business Value, Beth.
Thank you, Tom. I'm really quite honored to be able to share more about my experience with you today.
I know that our listeners are going to love this. So let's tee it up a little bit. Tell us about Medistar Home Health.
Okay, that's kind of like asking me to tell about my children, so stop me. But Medistar Home Health was a Medicare certified home health agency. We had about 300 nurses, physical therapists, occupational and other therapists, home health aides, and administrative staff. All of the operations were actually in the state of Louisiana, whereas I am located in Dallas. That is my home state. But we had 10 offices throughout Louisiana and one here in Dallas.
Well, it must have been Louisiana, because only people who live or work in Louisiana actually call it Louisiana.
Right.
All the rest of the world calls it Louisiana, right?
That's right.
But that is clear demonstration that it was that you worked in and around Louisiana. So how did you start the business?
Well, at least at the time, and I presume is still the case, in the state of Louisiana, in most states, you have to have a license to operate. You also have to be approved by Medicare. So Louisiana at the time had a moratorium on the issuance of new licenses. So the only way to get into the business was to purchase a license, and then you had to get certified by Medicare. And I had previously worked for the Diversified Home Health Agency, and it had other healthcare concerns associated with it. When the prior owner decided to make a sale of the 4 home health agencies, I, along with other potential acquirers, went through the due diligence, which was kind of interesting since I was the president and CFO of the company. So I had a little bit of an inside track. But anyway, I was the winner and was given the opportunity to purchase them in 2004.
Oh, 2004. So I didn't realize that you were the CFO of that. But you hadn't spent your whole life doing that. What was your background before you got into Medistar?
Right. I had actually no healthcare experience whatsoever.
That's like a lot of entrepreneurs, right? Yes.
Yeah, which made it, quite interesting. But yeah, my career prior to jumping in and learning about the industry it started in 1996 when I left the CPA world. When I got out of college, I started with one of the large international firms, and found fairly quickly that that was not my niche. I had the opportunity when I was in college one summer to work for a small CPA firm that worked with entrepreneurs. And that was really my passion, working for small businesses. So I left that and went to work for a regional firm and eventually founded my own firm. And when I decided to have my first exit from a business ownership standpoint, not too long after that, one of my ex-clients had approached me and was getting into the business and asked me to come on board. So I jumped in and found it fascinating and challenging business to learn.
No kidding. You know what? We may have to do a follow-up podcast to talk to you about the exit from your CPA business then. So fast forward, just to get in the interest of a little background here, this was one of your clients, you went to work for your client and then ultimately bought the business and ran it until 2017. Ultimately, what made you decide it was time to sell it?
Well, that decision was very much influenced by what was going on industry-wide, healthcare-wide. It's interesting that, when I first bought the business, I was almost startled that business advisors and other business people would ask, "What's your exit strategy?" I'm going, "Well, whoa, I'm trying to figure out my entrance strategy," and I just, I love the business. I love the people. I really started responding, I think it's going to be death. I mean, I can't see myself doing anything else. I loved it. But, you've got to be real. And the healthcare industry was undergoing lots of consolidation. And I felt that the time was fast approaching that either I needed to be a big acquirer or possibly a seller. And obviously, I took the route of becoming a seller.
Wow. Yeah, that's almost some market timing information there, right? Because of the changes that were going on in healthcare at the time. It's not an uncommon story, though, to hear business owners say that they don't give a lot of thought to their exit strategy, and in fact, that leads to a lot of horror stories. We've got the podcast last week for our listeners was about a gentleman who tried to sell his business and ultimately wound up closing it because it was not sellable. And so I applaud you for being able to get there. Let's talk about your exit strategy, not your entrance strategy. At what point did you become intentional about developing an exit strategy, or did a transition show up one day and just say, "Hey, Beth, I'd like to buy your business"?
Well, after that initial response that I kind of teased about, my exit strategy was my death. I really did focus on it. And it really kind of evolved for me. Once again, my background was the CPA world, working with, at the beginning, working with large companies and entrepreneurial companies. And I was an auditor. And I certainly appreciated good systems, good policies. And it occurred to me that as I was putting systems and policies and procedures, et cetera, in place, that I was simultaneously, preparing for my exit strategy at whatever point that came to be. So I was very intentional once I got my brain in gear going, well, wait a minute, what I'm doing now and an exit strategy, they're not really that different. In my mind, it wasn't.
Well, you had the benefit of having exited a business before, right? And so you understood some of those things that a lot of entrepreneurs don't. And that is that having those defined processes and systems and good accounting. I would assume as a CPA, you would have good accounting practices, but hopefully it's not the story of, the cobbler whose children have no shoes, right? But a lot of times business owners kind of neglect those things that make a business more transferable. And so I applaud you for thinking about it that way. Did you ever have a timeline for your sale? And and did the timeline go as predicted? So at some point you realize that this is really not only improving my business but preparing it for sale. Did you establish in your mind, well, here's my time frame?
Well, no, years ago, I did not. And quite frankly, I sold it much sooner than I thought I would. I for many years would have preferred to have. But again, as I mentioned earlier, it's like I didn't want to be, timing is everything. And an example that I use quite frequently when talking with my staff and colleagues is that we need to be evolving. We need to be prepared for what is coming towards us. We got to take care of today, but we've got to constantly be looking forward. And the analogy I used was Blockbuster. If you remember those days where, we wanted to watch a movie, we got in the car, rode to the Blockbuster store, picked out one or two, what were those things called?
Videotapes.
Thank you.
VCR,
those tapes that you had to stick in a machine and come home and watch it, et cetera, et cetera. And then it just seemed like overnight, all of a sudden, that wasn't the way to go. And even though there's nothing like, home healthcare is nothing like the Blockbuster, the video market, I felt like, from a business standpoint, conceptually, it was. We can't assume status quo today is it's going to be the way things are in the future. So I just always had that going in the back of my mind. And like I said, it was a lot of acquisitions going on. And in my industry, at least back then, there were a lot of mom and pops, and I didn't want to be one of the mom and pops, shuttering the store. So I always postured us for growth and strategically, I think.
I'm going to assume that most of our listeners know the story of Blockbuster, but just a short snippet there. Back in, I want to say it was probably around somewhere in the 2000, maybe 1 to 3 time frame, some little startup company called Netflix approached Blockbusters because they were running out of capital and they needed an investment. So they tried to sell the company to Blockbuster, and Blockbuster, of course, said, "Well, there's no way that anybody's ever going to want to stream movies and videos online." And of course, we know now, the tale of that tape. Netflix, owns the market for that, and the last Blockbuster store shuttered a year or two ago, and so which is amazing that it hung on for that long. So I love that story. It's a great example to on two fronts. The Netflix was almost out of money, and they didn't know if they could go any further, and they tried to sell themselves, but they powered through that pain, found additional investment, and here they are in the market. On the other hand, a company that just was too slow to react to what was going on in the marketplace, Blockbusters, doesn't even exist any longer. And so those are stories that I think are both great lessons for business owners. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Well, how long from when you finally said, okay, this is it, we're going to sell it? How long did the entire process take? You said it was faster than you thought. So how long did it take from when you were ready to sell until you actually closed the transaction?
That part's easy, a year.
1 year. Okay.
Yeah, 2016. I was like, okay, I seriously think, this is the time. And and I was just dead set determined to finish by December 31st, 2016. It's like, well, lo and behold, that was a Sunday or something. So, anyway, The effective date was, in fact, January 1st, 2017.
No kidding. That is faster than many. The average process for business owners is 12 to 18 months. And but for everyone that closes, I hear many deals that can close in, 6 months or less. But for every deal that does that, there are deals that hang on for years, right, and don't close. So I applaud you for being able to get that done. Did you have a transition team to help you market the business and go out and prepare it to sell?
I I did. My team was, in fact, in the beginning, before I brought in, my upper management to help out with things. But anyway, I interviewed and hired a leading, an industry leading M&A advisory firm. And although, as I was checking with my, trusted advisors, if you will, I realized that from a fee standpoint, they were probably the most expensive of any of them I interviewed. But I tell you what, they were well worth the time and effort and money.
Awesome. That's I'm glad to hear that. So many people try to go it alone, and you really do sort of need a team to help you. It sounds like you had the right M&A advisors. What role did they play with you and for you through the process?
Early on, you asked about marketing. They worked with me. To me, that was my first level of due diligence. They requested a lot of information, and I put that together, and they put together a spectacular book, if you will, a marketing brochure. And then through discussions with quite a few discussions I had with them, we narrowed down who this confidential document would go to. And so they already had a list of real prospects that either had expressed interest in purchasing a company our size, or in our geographic region, or one way or the other thought that might be a good match. So that in and of itself saved a lot of time and effort and confidentiality. Like most businesses don't want to be known that they're up for sale. And I would think particularly in a service industry that if people start getting scared and leave, well, then your asset is quickly diminishing in value. Because essentially you're selling, what you've got, your people, your systems, everything. There's not a whole lot of brick and mortar in the home health care industry.
No, you're right.
The majority of the due diligence, the whole, 12-year, excuse me, that was a slip. Yeah, it probably seemed like 12 years.
At the time, it probably did.
Was, going through the process of zeroing in on who the purchaser we thought might be the best purchaser for the best, price, et cetera.
So just again, for explanation here, a lot of times then when you hire an M&A advisor, many times that's in the form of a business broker or an investment banker. It's really good to find somebody who has experience in the space, who can be an advisor for you. It sounds like you did that. Some of the documents that folks may or may not be aware of, when you go out and identify the prospects, then typically you send them a teaser, which gives them just enough information where they really can't figure out who it is.
Right.
And then if that piques their interest, then they sign non-disclosure agreements, right? So that they will hold whatever information in confidence. And then once they do that, then typically you send them probably the package that was put together is called a CIM, CIM, which is a confidential information memorandum, which is typically, it can be hundreds of pages, right? Anywhere from 50 to a couple of hundred pages to talk in more detail about the business. And so sounds like those are the documents that perhaps they were using. And that's just a side note to educate folks on doing that. You mentioned due diligence. So when it got down to it, did you just pick one of the folks to move forward and get into heavy due diligence, or did you have multiple folks you were trying to do that for at the same time?
I picked one to move forward, and at that point, it was very intense.
Yes, I bet. All right. So how now you're an accountant by trade, right? You're a CPA by trade. So how did your due diligence process go? Was it fun and, rainbows and ice cream?
Yeah, I think the slip when I said 12 years instead of 12 months a moment ago kind of is a clue there. But oh my goodness. Mentioning my prior CPA background, and in fact, the diversified healthcare company that I worked for, before, I felt like I sort of knew all about this due diligence process. Come to find out, whoa, it was okay. So the whole list of documents and information that was needed, it was pages and pages and pages and line items and line items and line items long. And I wanted to be thorough, and I wanted to keep it close to the vest as long as realistically, could be done. And so I didn't get a whole lot of sleep. I was dogged. And I think from my CPA firm, experience as auditor, it helped me from the standpoint of, if it was on the list, I pretty much thought it needed to be provided. So, I was just going through the list, and it was nice that they had a virtual data room, so I could just upload the document. When I had a document, I could upload it. And in a number of instances, in one section of the due diligence, say in the case of Medicare home health agency, regulatory, it's quite a lengthy area. Then you got your tax, and then you got your legal, and then you got your accounting, and it goes on and on and on. And, and you're like going, seriously, how many times have I provided this document? It's over here in the tax, it's in the legal, it's in the regulatory, it's on the clinical. But this is where I think maybe my audit experience came into, it's like, those are different groups of people that are going to be taking that piece of the due diligence. So just upload it again, check it off, and go, look at what I've done. I just uploaded 5 documents when in fact it was 1. So I didn't want to get bogged down in the details, but yeah, it was quite voluminous as far as the documentation required.
Do you remember how many information requests they gave you?
I don't. I think that might be trying to remember a bad dream or something. Literally, it was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Hey, someone said to me the other day, hey, a nightmare is a dream. So the only reason I asked that question is because a couple of weeks ago, we had a guest, David Weibel from Industry Weapon. He had a process to actually maintain that. And they had, I think the number was 674 requests for information. 674. Now that's a lot more than normal, but I imagine in your business, which is healthcare related, it probably was not far off that number.
I would totally agree with you. I would say it seems there were at least that many. But again, there were a lot of duplicates. But
so do you feel
like it was like I get it to check off a lot at one fell swoop.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's and you brought up an excellent point too. Just because they ask in due diligence doesn't mean you have to go out and create it. And many times, if there's something that you consider to be a minor ask, you can. I've done this before in mine. No data to provide. And upload that document, by the way, which checks the box. Right?
Exactly. I did quite a bit of that, and they'd be real impressed. It's like, oh my gosh, she's uploaded another 25 documents when in fact many of them may have been the same document, Word document. This is not applicable.
Exactly. Now, do you feel like the process of due diligence added value to the business, or did it detract value from the sale?
Oh, it definitely added value. Particularly, seriously, I don't work for an M&A advisory firm, but they having them on my team, and especially having one in this particular case that was specialized in healthcare, and even further drill down to home health. They had some other specialties, but it wasn't like everything in the world. Hospital is so different from home health care, but they really added value, not only in terms of the professional book, the having the intermediary to negotiate the sales price. I was very pleased with the sales multiple, and had I not used the M&A advisory firm that I did, I would have sold myself short, quite frankly.
And so that additional multiple that you traded at probably paid all the fees and then some.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's no doubt.
Yeah. So sometimes at the end of a due diligence process, again, let me just back up and quick explanation. So after you provide the SIM, then they typically provide an offer letter or a letter of intent. You agree to a price, and then they start the real deep due diligence process. But at the end of that, by the way, due diligence is really designed. Yes, there is information that the buyer needs, but a lot of times, especially for sophisticated buyers, it's an opportunity for them to discover things that were not previously disclosed and allow them to adjust the purchase price accordingly. So I call that the retrade conversation. And I've had many of those through the years. I've been on the giving end of those conversations and on the receiving end. But did you have a retrade conversation after due diligence?
I'm real happy to say that we didn't ever get that far. We
Really?
were headed in that direction. I mean, I knew the area on the financial statement on the balance sheet that had the most vulnerability. Quite frankly, it was the biggest item on there, and the accounts receivable. And when you're dealing with government accounts receivable, it can be very interesting, very, very challenging to collect. And I won't go down that road politically speaking, but I knew that was where we had vulnerability. And when we were kind of headed in that direction, I really called on the financial team of the M&A advisory firm and to help me with the arguments that we were going to make together. And we did. We had, quite a number of conversations directly about that. But we were able to head off an actual retrade of the amount.
Oh, good for you. That is so rare, and good for you for really identifying the point of vulnerability. What I tell our clients is, think about those things in advance and disclose them as early as possible, because if the buyer knows something before they make an offer letter, they can never claim ignorance later. And I've actually headed off a retrade conversation for that reason. Somebody thought that they discovered something in due diligence, and I went back and showed them where I had disclosed it prior to the offer letter, and it headed off that conversation. By the way, for our clients in the process we go through, putting together that data room, a lot of times that's done in advance of even starting a process. Even though there's going to be requests in due diligence that we never think of, the bulk of those traditional things will already reside in a data room with our clients, so that it'll cut the process down a little bit. So fast forward to closing day. Now it's time for your employees to find out, how did they react? And how did this transition impact them?
The initial reaction was fear, apprehension, fear of the unknown, whether they were going to be keeping their job, what it was going to be like, was the culture going to change, this quote big company coming in and buying them after they had been used to being able to, despite the dispersion of the offices, they pretty much all of them felt they could pick up the phone and call me with a question or concern or recommendation. And the fear was, is that going to be the case anymore? Another aspect of it, and this is not uncommon, at least in home health agencies, is usually not immediately, but very soon after the close, the new purchaser wants to transition into a new name. And a lot of staff that have been with me for a long time, and particularly those on the business development end, were concerned about losing the identity of something that they've worked so hard and so many years to create. And it's like, you're going to come in and you're no longer ABC company, now you're XYZ company. How does the business development team go back out and go, yeah, I know yesterday we were XYZ, but now we're ABC. And how to believe yourself and then go sell it, if you will, that we're the same, but even better. Again, in a nutshell, concern and fear, and that was, the challenge to alleviate those.
Yeah, those are very common things. Do you stay in touch with any of those folks?
Well, that's a little tricky because I had a very long non-compete agreement, and so a couple of people that I've worked with literally for 20 years. We're friends. It's like, okay, well, but we're friends. But I was very, very careful not to violate the terms of them. So I don't really, if they reach out to me like on social media or something, I'll respond and that kind of thing. But which, by the way, is kind of how I'm best able to go, okay, well, my key leaders in this area and this area are still with the company. So that makes me feel better. Anyway.
That's a very common feeling with business owners. They want to take care of the people that have been with them and help them get there. Look, we need to take a break. We're talking with Beth Denton, a member of the 17% Club. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
Don't you want to be a 17%er too? Of course you do, and we can help you get there. This fall, Mastery Partners is on a mission to unmask the value of your business with our incredible tool, the Transition Readiness Assessment, or as we like to call it, the TRA. In a simple and complicated way, the TRA unmasks where you are generating value in your business and where you aren't. This comprehensive assessment pinpoints your hits and misses so you can focus on what's working and solve what's not. What you do today matters and will have a tremendous impact on the future value of your business. Get your TRA today and be a 17%er. Go to masterypartners.com, schedule a call with Tom, and join our TRA challenge. Don't be deceived. Uncover and know how to build massive value in your business.
We're back with Beth Denton, a business owner who successfully sold her business, Medistar Home Health, in 2017. So, Beth, as we kind of come into the home stretch here, what did you learn going through this whole process?
Well, quite simply, you can never, ever be over-prepared. And even when you think you are prepared, you're probably not. Another thing that's really important, or it was to me, is to have a good support system outside of work. I was all in 150%. And it was nice to have those outside of work support me.
That is excellent. I know you have a great support network, and I'm part of that maybe. So, and I know you're definitely part of my support network. I'll tell you that right now. So what would you have done differently? Knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently in the process or before the exit or whatever?
I would have seriously started interviewing M&A advisory firms earlier than I did, allowed more time in that process. Although before I did, throughout the ownership, I kept in touch with different M&A advisory firms. They'd want to see how the business is going, et cetera, et cetera. And I had an idea who I thought I might go with, and I eventually went with them. But I didn't want to be set in with one idea and not consider the others. So I would have started earlier, because the time between the point at which I really thought, okay, this is serious, I need to really look into doing this, till we got to the point where we selected the LOI we're going to work with, and then had that 647 line item list. That took more than the rest of it for me. But I was dead set on the December 31st or January 1st deadline, and that there was a change in presidents and administration, and we were all trying to guess who that was going to be and how the change was. So, yeah, that was a lot of fun. But I was like, I'm going to close.
Yeah. So let's get into kind of the meat of the act. You're on with business owners, and business owners are listening to this, what advice would you give business owners who are looking to eventually transition their business?
Well, first and foremost, the old, 5 Ps, proper planning prevents poor performance. And we're in, of course, this situation, performance is the sale. So plan from day one, put your systems in place, etc. Have a strong management team. It's easier said than done quite often, but that is key, particularly in my case, when you have a service business. That's what you're selling, is your team, your people, your systems. And talk about systems, have comprehensive written policies and procedures in place. Some of what they found at Medistar Home Health, I think they were quite surprised, given the fact that, it was a sole owner, it was me. We had 300 people. That's a small business, but, don't act like a small business. Document these things, hire professionals and understand the exit strategies and the sales process. Do not shortcut this. I've said a lot today about, my belief with hiring professionals in conjunction with the sale. And then lastly, on the tail end, this is, be willing to turn your baby over to the new owners. If it's going to be a successful transition, you can't have the owner, hanging on and whispering in the employees' ears and that sort of thing. You got to be ready to do that.
And so many owners aren't, right? They live under. Now, did you stay on with the company after the sale for any period of time?
Yeah, for a few months. That was part of all the documentation and the agreement.
And that's typically called a transition period, but you didn't have like a long-term, multi-year agreement.
No, just a matter of months.
A lot of times business owners will sell their business, particularly for sizable businesses that might find a financial buyer and take a multi-year contract, right, to stay on with them. But they find pretty quickly that somebody else is calling the shots.
Yeah.
And business owners don't like that. And so the average tenure for a founder CEO to stay with a company that they have a multi-year agreement with, the average tenure is 17 months. Because they just can't stand it much longer, seeing somebody else. You mentioned that it's your baby. You got to let somebody else kind of raise the child from that point forward. And boy, what I tried to make notes. 5 Ps. I love that. I had not heard that. Proper planning prevents, what is it?
Performance.
Proper planning prevents poor performance. I'm going to use that. I will always give credit. I do that. But the piece about finding the right people and having the right team in place, I forget who said it. It was Stephen Covey or Gino Wickman or somebody in one of their books. First who, then what, right? Make sure that you have the right people doing those things. And just because you are a small business doesn't mean you have to act like one. I love that. That is great advice. And documenting these things, I've actually seen businesses get a higher multiple because their processes are so well documented. And even though the company buying them is a bigger company, they want to adopt those processes and procedures, and therefore it makes the company more valuable. That's part of the intangibles that people don't think about. Certainly your people are the intangibles, your intellectual property are your intangibles, but it's your processes, right, that are intangibles that can add significant value. Boy, those are all great pieces of advice. I'll be talking about these for a long time. So you sold the business. Did you have any idea what you were going to do after the sale? I call that Act 3. We have Act 1, which is kind of youth and young and dumb. And Act 2 is our earning years and power years and raising a family years. And then Act 3 is what's left, right? So did you have an idea of what you were going to do for Act 3?
I had very little idea, really. I was, I talk about my employees being apprehensive. I was quite apprehensive, and it took me a long time to use the word retirement, and I wasn't 100%. I was close, but I wasn't 100% sure that was, the primary direction I was headed. And just the way I am, I read a bunch of books about how to retire. I was like, what am I going to do when I wake up and I'm not passionate about improving my business? But I'll have to say I've adjusted quite well. I'm staying active, and it's been good. We are in the midst of COVID redo or whatever, so that's kind of stalled the travel, but that's a passion of mine.
I do know that you're traveling a lot, which is awesome. I know that COVID kind of tailed that off for a little bit, but hopefully you guys are back in the saddle and doing that. But so other than that, what are you doing now that you sold your business?
Well, it's been 4.5 going on 5 years now, and during
I guess it is that long.
Yeah. During most of that time, I've been on the board of directors of 2 nonprofit organizations, one of which was with you. And that particular one has term limits, or consecutive term limits. And so I rolled off that board at the beginning of this year. I'm on the other board, and it keeps me engaged, and I'm able to give back. And I knew that was one of my goals, is to be able to have more time to give back to the community through the organization, through which we met. I really wanted to give back to that organization, and particularly as a result of all the good trusted advisors I had through that organization that helped me during my sale. So I was on the board, I was on committees, and I still am on the other organization. I mentioned travel.
I roped you into a committee or two with Business Navigators too. So.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah.
We're not quite done with you yet.
Okay, not sending me out to pasture.
Hey, I rotate off the board this year, so
yeah, that's why I did a little smile when I said, the organization has this policy, unless you're like Tom Bronson and have the policy rewritten so you can stay on another year.
No.
Oh gosh, yeah, it was that a unanimous decision? But anyway, it's amazing to me, how my time is filled with rewarding activities and being able to give back. And one more thing is, although travel's my passion and personal fitness is not, that's been another one of my goals, because I know, how important taking care of your mind and body and spirit is to have a nice, rewarding, long life. And that's my plan.
Well, you've always looked like one of the fittest people in the room, as far as I'm concerned. So you've been doing something right, even though you say it hasn't been your passion. You have been an amazing business owner for a couple of different businesses. And I always like to ask this question as we kind of round up our podcast. One last kind of business question. The podcast is all about maximizing business value. As a former business owner and a couple of businesses yourself, what is the one most important thing you recommend business owners do to build long-term value in their businesses?
Well, short-term sacrifices can yield long-term rewards. So don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Make investment in your business, in your people, whether that be education, training, whatever, and invest in the necessary tools of the trade, technology, professionals, business development. Don't suck your company dry because you want another shiny whatnot. Invest in your company, and it can yield long-term benefits.
I think that is great advice, but I can't let you off the hook. I do have one more question for you, Beth. Our longtime listeners know that I always ask our bonus question. It's one of my favorite questions, and I know it is for our listeners. So here's your bonus question. What personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble throughout the years? I can't wait to hear this because I can't think of anything for you.
Okay. Well, then see, you know me. So, it's gotten me in the most trouble. To me, that means, some rules are broken, and I'm pretty much a rule follower. But I think one trait that has not served me well is that although I can be, quite skeptical, one thing that has been challenging to me over the years is that somebody's on my team and they say something, I tend to believe it to be the truth, and that we're all have the same goal, paddling in the same direction. And then, some people are not really paddling on time. They're may not even be in the same boat, it's that, I think a number of people said it, Ronald Reagan did, as well, is that, trust but verify. Yeah.
Trust and verify.
Trust and verify. So that's been challenging to me from a personal, interaction with my colleagues standpoint. Like, seriously, you can look at my face and tell me this, but most of my team was with me for many years, decades. So it wasn't the overriding thing. I had great folks, but
yeah,
you never know.
That is awesome. So skepticism, you think, has gotten you into. I'm gonna categorize it that way. Beth, you have been a wonderful guest. Thank you for sharing your story with us, and thanks for being on our podcast today.
It's been my pleasure, Tom. Always enjoyed visiting with you, and I enjoyed sharing my experiences.
And I know that lots of business owners will benefit from those experiences. You can find Beth Denton on LinkedIn, or of course, you can always reach out to me, and I will be happy to make a warm introduction to my good friend. This is the Maximize Business Value podcast, where we give practical advice to business owners on how to build long-term sustainable value in your business. Be sure to tune in each week and follow us wherever you found this podcast. And be sure to tell your friends about us. We'd love to continue to reach other business owners and help them learn and understand from our experiences. So until next time, I'm Tom Bronson, reminding you that it is never take the advice of Beth Denton. It is never too early to start planning for your ideal desired exit strategy while you maximize business value.
Thank you for tuning into the Maximize Business Value podcast with Tom Bronson. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition on their terms. Learn more on how to build long-term sustainable business value and get free value-building tools by visiting our website, www.masterypartners.com. That's master with a Y, masterypartners.com. Check it out.
That was perfect. I wouldn't make any changes on that.